记录时代精神，连接东西方精英翘楚。这里是英国首都伦敦，欢迎您收看瑞内人物访谈节目。本期节目，我们有幸邀请到来自于瑞士日内瓦城市航空运输行动小组代理执行董事 Helden Dodd 先生，和我们分享新时代航空业如何实现脱碳。在全球范围内，伴随着航空业从历史上最严重的危机中复苏，该行业实现了一个重要的里程碑，其旨在推动航空运输的第三个时代，即全球净零碳连通性。2021年10月，全球航空运输业通过了一项新的长期目标，来应对气候变化所带来的影响，即承诺到2050年实现净零碳排放。由航空运输行动小组代表商业航空业就飞行净零2050宣言，联合世界主要航空业协会，包括航空公司、机场、空中交通管制机构和最大的飞机和发动机制造商承诺，以减少二氧化碳的排放量，致力于支持巴黎协定的成果及其长期目标，使其温室气体减排上升幅度限制在1.5摄氏度。这一举动大大更新了早先在2009年设定的全行业目标，即与2005年相比，2050年将净零碳排放量减少50%。面对雄心勃勃且具有挑战的航空运输目标，新科技的组合包括潜在的短途服务转向以电力、氢力能源为主，改善运输和基础设施，争取到本世纪中叶向可持续航空燃料过渡，进一步为碳减排的目标实现做出卓越的贡献。其余碳排放量将有待于使用碳清除措施来捕获。航空业能否加速推进有效的措施，推进能源转型的创新，这与世界各国政府的支持是密不可分的。Let us welcome Helden. Welcome for your time join the program today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So the first question for Helden is, please share with us what the air transport active group mission and which region do you cover, please? 请与我们分享航空运输行动小组 ATAG 的使命以及覆盖的区域。Helden, please.
Excellent. Yes. So the Air Transport Action Group is an organization that brings together all the different parts of the aviation industry. So we represent the world's airlines, airports, air traffic control organizations, and the major aircraft and engine manufacturers that make planes that we fly through the skies. And so we represent the whole aviation sector. And we really focus on sustainability as an issue. So this can be environmental sustainability, but also the sustainability of the industry more broadly. And of course, climate change is one of the most important things that we're looking at the moment. When it comes to our reach, we are global. So we're a relatively small organization in terms of our team, but we cover the entire world and work to make sure that the industry as a whole has a good strategy for the long term into the future.
Thank you. Would you please give us the general picture about global aviation climate strategy up to 2015, please? 请您介绍一下到2050年全球航空气候战略的总体情况如何 ？Helden, please.
Absolutely. So aviation obviously has an impact on climate change. It's a relatively small impact at the moment. It's about 2% of global CO2 emissions. But of course, 2% is around about the same size as Germany, for example, or the United Kingdom. So it's small in the overall scheme of things, but it's certainly something that we need to take care of. And as aviation traffic continues to grow, and as other parts of the economy are able to decarbonize, then our emissions may grow grow as a proportion. And so for the last 15 years or so, through my organization and a number of other organizations, we've been really concentrating on how we can work together as a sector to try and reduce our emissions as much as possible. And we've actually got a very good track record in this area. So if we take, for example, a flight that you might have taken back in 1990 and compare it with the same flight that you take today, that will produce around half the CO2 emissions that the flight 30 years ago would have taken. So we've actually been improving our efficiency for many, many years, but we know that the growth in traffic is higher than the efficiency improvements that we've been able to accomplish. And so we need to do more. And as an industry 11 years ago, we came together and generated the world's first global sectoral roadmap in terms of CO2 reductions for any industry. So we had a short-term goal to improve efficiency over the 10 years since we set the goal, and we've exceeded that. We have a goal to cap our CO2 emissions for international aviation at 2020 levels, and we've got a mechanism in place through the United Nations to make that happen. And then we had a long-term goal. So we set that long-term goal 11 years ago, as I said, and then last year we actually increased the ambition of that long-term goal. So the new goal for aviation is for us to reach net zero CO2 emissions by 2050. It's an incredible challenge for an industry like ours. We don't have the technology off the shelf to do it today in terms of new types of aircraft, and we can get onto that in a minute, but at least we're working to make sure that that happens, and we've got other options available to us that we can look to get to that net zero 2050 goal. So that's a brief overview of where we've come from as an industry.
Thank you. Thank you. What do the decarbonization opportunity come from? 实现能源系统脱碳从何而来呢? Please.
Yeah, so we've got a few different options. And when we decided to look at whether we could increase the ambition of the goal, we wanted to make sure that we were able to achieve it. We didn't want to just set a goal that was very aspirational but unachievable. We wanted to make sure that we were able to go through the process and understand where the emissions reductions could come from. So we put together a program of 70 experts from across the industry over the course of about 2.5 years. And detailed in our Waypoint 2050 report how we could actually get to that net zero goal. And it comes from a range of different things. So I mentioned technology before, and there are some options for technology improvements in sort of conventional aircraft. So each new generation of aircraft that comes on board reduces CO2 emissions per seat by about 20% over the models that it replaces. That will continue with new generations of conventional aircraft. And then we're also looking at the possibility of things like hydrogen as a power source and electricity as well. So electricity likely to be just for small aircraft, commuter size aircraft. So this is under 20 seats. And then the potential is for hydrogen to maybe play a role from around 2035, let's say, in short haul aircraft. But we know that the most important part of our emissions reduction plan for a majority of the CO2 emissions from aviation will be around sustainable aviation fuels. So these are fuels that are made from non-food crops, from waste sources, and also even electricity that can reduce CO2 emissions by up to 80% compared to fossil fuel. So the point is there are a range of different options available. We've mapped out different scenarios looking at different levels of each of those operations and technology and sustainable aviation fuel opportunities. We know that we can get to net zero by 2050. We know it's going to be an enormous challenge, but that it can be done, and that there are a few different pathways to get there.
Thank you. So what does the aviation industry need from the government? 政府需要从哪些方面对航空业提供导向呢? Please.
So there are a number of different areas where we need support from governments and other parts of the economy as well. So one of those areas is in the right policy support, particularly for example, sustainable aviation fuel. At the moment, SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel, is more expensive than traditional fossil fuel for us, about 2 to 4 times as expensive. We're already operating some flights on it at a very small level, but we need to start ramping that up very quickly. And we need the right policy environment to make sure that that happens. And this can come from a range of different policy options, depending on local circumstances. But we need governments to at least start looking at that and seeing how they can support the energy transition in aviation. That's really important. The other thing is the International Civil Aviation Organization, which is the UN specialized agency on aviation. They're meeting later on this year at the ICAO Assembly. And we're really hoping that governments at that meeting can agree to a long-term goal for aviation, similar to what we agreed last year, hopefully net zero by 2050. And that's really an opportunity for governments to get in behind the industry efforts and make sure that there's the right policy framework at a global level as well to support that progress to net zero. But it's also important to note that it's not just governments, it's not just the aviation industry itself, but it's also the energy industry. We need the oil and gas sector to really start looking at alternative supplies of fuel for us and putting their investment and their expertise behind that as well, and also hydrogen. We want to be part of the hydrogen economy. We know that there are a number of other sectors looking at hydrogen as an option, and so we want to make sure that we're part of that conversation as well.
Thank you. How confident are you of success to lead the aviation decarbonization? 您如何看待成功引领航空领域脱碳目标的实现呢 ？Please.
So I'm incredibly confident. I think that with the work that we've done with the Waypoint 2050 report, we know where we need to go. We know what kind of levers we need to pull in order to get to our net zero by 2050 commitment. The industry is united in this front, and the important thing is that even though we've been through probably the worst crisis in aviation history in the last 2 years with the pandemic and the shutdown in international traffic, airlines are in an incredibly bad financial position at the moment when it comes to debt that it's on their books. We also know that this has actually been a period where there's been more progress in climate change action in the industry than we've seen in the last 10 years. So even though we're going through a really rough period as an industry, actually the commitment is still there and has been accelerating as well. So I'm fairly confident that we can do that. I think we need the support from governments for sure. We need the support from the energy industry. But if we have those two pieces of support, I'm pretty confident that we can get to net zero by 2050 and continue to connect the world as we do at the moment, connect people, connect businesses, connect trade around the world, but to do it in a low carbon way. And that's really the important part of our future, to make sure that we can continue to travel and continue to see the world, but to do it without the carbon footprint that we have at the moment.
Thank you for bringing the wonderful discussion with the PBEC Society today. 再次感谢 Dodd 先生今天做客我们的访谈节目，欢迎您收看本期的瑞内人物访谈，我们下期再会。
谢谢。